Morning, Tyler. How are you, sir?
I'm good.
Good. Hey, by the way, did you get my message about the homework assignment?
Yeah, I didn't I forgot I had that.
Okay. Are you going to be able to get it done today?
Yeah.
Okay. More than anything, Tyler, the reason why I have those homework assignments, it's not part of a graded system that we use, but as a teacher, I want to make sure you're getting the concepts, um, because these concepts, especially in the advanced lesson, are a little bit more in depth, and there's it's important that I know that you guys know how to do this before you move on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can get that done, and do it in Google Docs, that works fine. Today's kind of a neat lesson because you guys are going to get to see the process of polishing concrete, um, from a commercial standpoint, and then we'll talk a little bit about how the school district does it, because this is a growing thing, and Elk Grove School District currently does something like this for um, some of the areas that they are turning in, taking a current concrete slab and making it into a polished concrete floor. It's pretty cool. How are you liking this class, Tyler, as far as the advance? Are you doing all right with everything?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay. Do you like that hands-on portion?
Yeah.
Cool. Good morning, Aman.
Morning.
How
You
are
got
you?
it, Mariano? Got it?
What's
I'm
that?
doing good. Oh, no, sorry.
I didn't quite get what you said, Aman.
Oh, no, I was, my daughter, she needs some help.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, it's one little one.
Okay. Hey, Amon, remember a reminder. I needed your homework assignment turned in.
Which one was that one, Dave?
That was the procedures on stripping and waxing.
Okay, all right. I'll work on it when I have a chance. It's kind of
Okay.
hard with the kids and stuff running around all day.
I hear you.
Yeah. All right, I'll try to work on it and I'll turn it in.
Okay. I appreciate it.
All
I'd like to have it if we can get it today. Latest would be tomorrow, because Friday we're going to wrap up this lesson on hard
right.
floors.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Cool. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
No problem.
Morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
Getting morning, Mark.
Good morning, everyone.
Tony, good morning. Christina, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Christina.
Our class is small today.
We've got some latecomers, but we are going to start anyway because we start promptly at 9 a.m. So good morning to you guys.
Recording in progress.
All right. So, hey, those of you who are looking to apply for job positions, there are 2 openings or 2 facilities that are currently hiring that I wanted to inform you about. Kaiser in Sacramento, I believe it's Kaiser North, is currently hiring for custodial positions. Also, UC Davis. If you are interested in applying at UC Davis, I will put the information onto the classroom today. I just got the information before we started class this morning from my contact. He is the director of custodial over there, a guy by the name of Finest Jones. And Finest has kind of grown up in the cleaning business as well. And he posted today that they are now hiring for custodial positions. So that's UC Davis, and that's over in Davis. It's the main university there. Benefits will be very good at UC Davis, so something to be aware of. Obviously, there's a commute there, but good place to work and really good management team out there. I know several of the guys on the management team, and so I would encourage you, if you're looking for a position in custodial, please let them know. I will also give the stuff. I do have Mark and Tony, I have your guys' stuff from the last class as well. So I will get that emailed out to you this afternoon. Okay. So, all right. So today we change gears a little bit in hard floor. We have been talking about resilient floors up till now. And now as we change gears, as we discussed the other day, we'll be talking about concrete floors. And some of the principles that we look at concrete floors for restoration will be applied to a certain extent in also marble and granite. Maybe not as aggressively as concrete is with the grinding, but you will get an idea of what is involved in creating a concrete or a polished concrete floor, seeing all the steps. This is a process with maybe not as aggressive of equipment, but still the same process that Elk Grove currently uses and a number of other school districts are using to take an existing concrete slab and turn it into a polished concrete floor. So we'll talk about the benefits of that, why polished concrete over others, and then we will also today go over the cleaning standard times. So I posted in our Google Classroom this week the information on the ISSA cleaning standard times. Now this one is a little bit older of a standard. They are not, they're more than willing to give me a printed book, but I needed a digital form, so I was able to get it from a distributor that I know of that gave me a digital one that they post out there. So it'll help us for our estimating of time. So we'll spend some time doing that as well today. So that's going to be the course of our class. Also in the Google Classroom, just as a note, I also posted in there information for you guys as to coverage rates, so that you guys could understand the coverage rates as we discussed the other day, and a few math problems in that regard. So that was posted in the Google Classroom under coverage rates. Okay. And I believe I posted that in the final project section as a reference tool. So it was not posted as a homework assignment, but it does give you some examples and as well a few to figure out on your own. Okay, so we'll get started with the polished concrete first. I thought it would be a good way to kind of get the morning started. And then from there, we'll jump into the estimating of how much time it takes to do things. And we'll wrap up with a quick breakout room so you guys can take your square footages for your areas and be able to kind of use this information to develop a standard of how much time it's going to take to be able to do the area you're doing for hard floors. So as you saw, by the way, we've covered how much materials it would take because we talked about that on our last class. Now we'll figure out how much time it takes. So that'll help you guys as you're putting together your plan for doing the hard floors. You have all that details. So we'll begin with the presentation I'm going to show you guys today as our starting point here is a presentation I've done for school districts when it comes to training them about polished concrete. Typically, we'll do about a 2-hour training on this. The reality is the classroom session is only about an hour that we do, and then they get another 6 hours of hands-on, just like you guys got the hands-on on the hard floor resilient. We do a hands-on on polished concrete. So this will give you an idea. We will not be doing that for our class though, so because I just don't have the equipment to be able to do it for you guys. So. All right. So let's talk about just what this will cover. The training on polished concrete covers what it is, the basic process, safety involved with it, the equipment, tooling, the chemicals that we would use, the slurry that is created, and the maintenance of polished concrete. So we'll cover all those things in the next hour. I will also, as part of this discussion, we're going to see a live demonstration. It's on YouTube, but it's a really nice demonstration of this process doing it dry grinding. And you can see all of the steps demonstrated, can see the equipment that's involved. So really neat opportunity for that. So what is polished concrete? Well, first of all, to understand polished concrete, it's basically a steps where we take an existing concrete floor, mechanically grind it, hone it, and polish it with a different grits of abrasives that are diamonds. It's then refined with a chemical that is called a densifier. Now, what are the benefits of a polished concrete floor? Why would a school, why would a facility want to use a polished concrete floor? Well, first of all, it's using the slab on the grade as a finished floor. So they're not having to put something on the top. We're not having to put carpet or tile or anything else. So there's no additional cost there. The cost is in actually taking that concrete slab and converting it to a polished concrete, one that is more durable in it. The other advantage is it's more resistant to high foot traffic. Okay, it's something that doesn't wear out nearly as easily. Anytime that we can use natural stone is far more durable than a resilient flooring that is man-made and is going to wear out. Interesting study is that most resilient floors really wear out within 10 years. Unfortunately, facilities might extend their life up to 15 years, but by 15 years, you start to run into issues. And issues we just saw on Saturday, where the floor tiles will start to pucker. You'll see that in seams on a resilient flooring. Carpet itself also needs to be replaced. So not only are we more resistant to high foot traffic, we also have what's called a longer service life, meaning the floor lasts longer. And anytime we can do that, then we reduce the cost of the actual building, because those are things that tied into the building's overall cost of use. So the other factor that plays into this is it is a lot less maintenance than a floor that we have to strip and wax all the time. We're not having to go in and put a floor finish on this floor. So that reduces our maintenance cost. In fact, it is one of the lowest maintenance types of floors there is a stone floor, whether it's polished concrete, ceramic tile, or granite floors, marble floors. They're much lower maintenance. What's really nice about a polished concrete is it's resistant to moisture transmission issues. In Elk Grove, this is an issue. Elk Grove has a real problem with moisture transition into the flooring because we are in a low-lying area that is a delta region. And as a result, we get a lot of moisture into our concrete and into our slabs. And as a result, one of the things that's happened is we've seen floor tiles popping off the floors. Elk Grove, Tony refers to it as exploding floor tiles that will literally just pop off the floor. And that is due to really high moisture content and some other issues. So from that standpoint, much more resistant to moisture transmission. The other benefit is it reflects light very nicely. It's very natural in a building. In fact, in a green building concept, polished concrete floors are part of a building program that helps to reduce energy costs because of the fact it reflects light nicely. So good lighting from windows and a polished concrete floor both help to reduce energy cost. And then lastly, one of the big benefits is it's a sustainable floor alternative. It obviously isn't requiring hazardous coatings. We don't have to use aggressive cleaners or adhesives. So as a result, those things are better. It's not putting into the landfill materials that over the life of the building will have to be replaced like old flooring materials. So from a green standpoint, polished concrete is a very green concept for flooring, a great alternative. Now, by no means is it the only or the best. It's just one of a variety of options. And aesthetically, it looks beautiful, as we will see in a lot of our pictures here. So how do we get polished concrete? What's involved with it? Typically, we'll take a concrete slab. Sometimes those slabs, like in the case of the schools, have a topical coating on it. Maybe they have a floor on there now that has to be removed. So that is part of it, is we have to remove those other old floorings. Then the process of grinding begins. And grinding is basically cutting into the floor. And if you know anything about concrete, concrete is a mixture of stone or aggregate and Portland cement, as well as water. And what ends up happening with that, when a concrete slab is put into a building as part of its foundation, they will take trowels and trowel the top of the concrete and give it a finished appearance. And that's also so that the floor itself doesn't have powdering issues. It doesn't have issues with dust all over the place. So even in a warehouse floor, they will trowel that floor. When we grind the floor, we are removing what's called the cream off the concrete. We're exposing some of the aggregate there. And we're going to use equipment equipped with metal diamonds to do this. And we'll start with a very aggressive low grit diamond. So we might start with a 30 or 40 grit and progressively continue to go higher and higher with our diamond count. And if you've ever done woodworking, sanding of surface, you know how that you start with an aggressive grit and then you'll work up progressively. When we get to a certain grit, normally about a 200 grit, we are now moving away from grinding and we'll begin the honing process. When we're honing a floor, before we do that, we're going to apply a chemical densifier. And I'll talk more about the densifiers, but that densifier is basically designed to help to prevent powdering issues, to make the concrete a little bit more hard or dense. And I'll explain more about how that works in a minute. We'll move from the grinding process into honing. Honing is where we start to get a little bit of our gloss of appearance. We're no longer cutting as much as we're just starting that process of getting that concrete to give some better light reflectivity and smooth it out. Progressively, as we go up in diamonds, we're removing the scratch pattern of the lower grit below it. So this is where we start to see brightness or clarity of the sheen with the honing. And we'll finish it with a polish. That is where we'll take a high grit, like an 800 grit. We can go all the way up to about a 3000 grit in polishing. And that's going to give that final shine that gives us a great reflection. And then the final step, that completion, we can, at that point, possibly apply a protective guard. I'll explain that to you in a minute. But we'll burnish the floor just to get it a nice, smooth, clean-looking floor, no residue left on it. Some safety issues involved with polished concrete. First of all, we are going to, when we're working with this, we are working with cutting tools, so we have to be safe. We want to make sure that we don't get anything that could possibly get a chip that might get into our eye. So if you're working with hand grinders, good safe practice is to wear either safety glasses or a face shield, depending on how close you're working with it. I recommend also the use of knee pads when you're doing the floor work of hand grinding. The other thing is using a respirator. And a respirator is used when we're doing this work with dry grinding, because what is the concern is the dust that is from concrete. You're going to see this in the video that I'll show you. The dust from polished concrete contains a material called silica. Silica is dangerous for us to breathe. So years ago, we worried about asbestos. Breathing of asbestos materials would cause damage to our lungs. Silica is a known carcinogen. So from that standpoint, if you're going to be dry grinding, there's some requirements, and I'll touch on those in just a moment. So a respirator if you're doing dry grinding, and then work boots, safety boots, because you are working in a construction area. So tennis shoes wouldn't be acceptable. This would now be work boots. Let's talk a little bit more about that silica dust. Osha, because silica is a known carcinogen, and it is something that we have identified as something that's unsafe, OSHA has now gotten involved and created a standard for everybody who is dealing with concrete dust. So that means if you are grinding of concrete, you are cutting or coring of concrete, anytime you are working with what is going to be silica dust, you have to do it in a safe manner. In fact, if you recall, out on the highways, you would see guys when they were doing work, maybe they were using saws or cutting into the slabs of concrete to cut it out. Now that cannot be exposed to the air. They're vacuuming it. This is a specialty vacuum, a very high-powered vacuum that is required if you're working with dry concrete dust. And what it has is a Hepa filter. And as you remember, a Hepa filter, okay, is a filter that is going to be high efficiency filter to get all the particulate out. Maria, I'm going to mute you for a minute here. Okay. So these vacuum systems, these HEPA filter vacuums, are designed to collect the dust. They also are designed in such a way that the filter that you see at the bottom, the dust collection, when it fills up, it will seal it up. And as a result, it's not exposing it to the air. In the video I'll show you, he's going to show you the dust particulate that was taken out of that filter. I think it was kind of an unwise move to show that from the standpoint of the way he was doing it. But if he had a mask on when he was filming it, then it'd be a little safer. But I get why he was showing it, because he wanted you to see the concrete dust. So all of our equipment is going to be hooked up to one of these vacuums, including even hand grinders. So now all the equipment these days is all set up where you determine, are you going to use it wet or dry? The option, if you are going to avoid these vacuum systems, you can use, and it's the method I recommend, is polish wet. And the advantage of wet polishing is that twofold. One, it avoids the diamonds getting too hot, so it extends the life of our diamonds. Because what will happen with diamonds when they get extremely hot from the friction being created, what will happen is they'll glaze over, and no longer are they going to be effectively cutting. So all of our equipment would need to be set up with this if we are doing dry grinding. If not, then you can do it wet. And again, there's equipment set up, all the polishers, grinding equipment that you can use it wet. As I mentioned in the process, talking about the equipment, there is going to be times where you're going to have to remove an existing flooring. This is going to be accomplished by a couple different means. One is a machine that is designed with a specialty blade that will remove large amounts of flooring. I believe Elk Grove has one of these kinds of machines. We used it when they were removing some of the flooring over at Prairie Elementary when we redid that floor a few years ago. In the maintenance department, they had something like this, but theirs was, I believe they may have even had a ride-on version of it that can do large areas. So these machines are designed for removing that kind of flooring. The other kind of tool is this can go on to a swing buffer, and you'll notice it has these little blades here, and these are rectangular, or not rectangular, square little diamond blades that are designed to remove mastic. The third option is to use something like this. Again, you would have to use a stripper tool to remove the actual flooring. So it'd either be done by hand with a hand tool or something like this to mechanically do it. These are going to be designed to remove mastic and coatings. And these are something you'll see a little bit more on. This is a diamond tool that is put onto a grinding machine. And this could be used to remove that mastic or adhesives as well. Now, this is some of the standard equipment that could be used in small jobs. This is a little bit more like what you'll see the school use. This is a weighted machine. You can add weights to the top of it. But unlike your traditional floor swing buffer like you guys use, this has got a beefed up motor that is 1 3/4 horsepower. So it can take the abuse of running these diamonds on it. Currently, Elk Grove uses a machine from a company called Clark that is a really durable machine. In comparison in cost, a standard swing buffer cost about $700. A Clark machine cost over $4,000. So they're much more durable, much more heavy duty. A lot of times the gearing inside is stainless steel gearing designed to be able to take the torque that's involved when we're doing diamond polishing. The second machine option that is used, again, in small applications is a propane powered polisher or grinder. And this has 3 heads to it that we can put a variety of diamonds on. And this is great for being able to do it because it's designed to do wet grinding or wet polishing or honing. And it has this water tank up top. So it feeds water down to the diamonds. It keeps it nice and cool. But it does create, instead of a concrete powder, it creates a concrete slurry. Once concrete's in a slurry, it's no longer got that silica dust that could cause a problem for us in respirating. However, that slurry needs to be disposed of properly, because if you pour it down a drain, it'll re-solidify as concrete and it'll clog the drains. Here's a couple other pieces of equipment that can be used if you are doing, and this is typically going to be used for pickup and rinse process, and possibly in the final polishing steps. We could put diamond heads on the auto scrubber for use for our final polishing stages, usually with an 800 or 1500 grit. And we'll use it for wet pickup or just a wet dry vacuum. We've got to be able to pick up that slurry. So those are some of the pieces of equipment we might use. This is a handheld grinder. There's a lot of different companies that make these. They are typically set up with one of 2 different setups, either a vacuum piece, so it's like you see here, this is sealed to the floor. So one side will have a vacuum part that will hook up to your vac hose, or a new feature that they have is a water line that will feed water right into this, and therefore it can be used for wet grinding or polishing. And you're going to see in our video where we would use this along the edges and in tight areas. Now, a lot of times we talk about diamonds in polished concrete. What are diamonds? What are diamond tooling? First of all, they are actually true diamonds. Anybody know a little bit about how we get diamonds? Where do we get diamonds from?
Caves.
We mine them, right?
Yeah.
So if we're mining diamonds, they become very expensive. We have learned how to create synthetic diamonds that last as long. They're the same thing. They're made from coal, the same way, compressed, but they are still they are the hardest substance known to man, and as such, they do a great job of cutting. So diamond tooling is used in polishing concrete. They're affixed to a rotary machine like we talked about. And there's a few reasons why we like diamonds. One is obviously their hardness. Number two is what we call their thermal transfer, meaning how heat is distributed with them so that they last longer. Anything else, what we found is it just gets too hot and burns up real easily. So diamonds themselves last longer. The chemical inertness, I'm not real familiar with that. It was put into this, and I'll be honest, it's a little bit more technical than I'm aware of. But what I do know is basically how diamonds are put into the tooling is through a different bond, because the diamonds themselves have to be attached to the tool or put into the tool. So there's a few different ways they do that. One is what we call resin diamonds, and that's basically they're put into a resin. That could be something like an epoxy material, or they're actually put into and attached to the metal. And there's a couple different types of metals that are used. There is what we call metal bonds, where it is a true type of metal. And that metal is, we use different metals depending on the hardness of the concrete. So basically a very hard concrete like we have in California or the West Coast, we use a soft metal, something like aluminum or some other softer metal, to hold the diamonds in, because we want it to wear consistently. If we're dealing with a very soft concrete, like you'll see in the southeast part of the United States, like in Florida and Georgia and those areas, then we would use a very hard metal, like iron or different metals along those lines. What you see pictured in the middle is what we call a resin bond. This is diamonds that are put into the epoxy material, the same with the one on the far right over here. If you notice, you can see in the tooling little flecks, and those little flecks are the diamonds that are included in them. And when you start to cut with these, you'll quickly be able to see after just one use the diamonds that are in there. These are very expensive pieces of tooling. This is considered a supply because it wears out quickly. So let's talk about the next step. We talked about how in polishing of concrete, we have to grind it with aggressive diamonds. Then we use a densifier. A densifier is something that creates a chemical reaction within the concrete. So to help us with that, I'm going to share with you guys a quick video from a company who makes these densifiers, a company called Prosoco. And take a look at this. This is just a couple minute video, and notice how these densifiers work.
So this is a polished concrete floor. Pretty nice, huh? Before work began, the floor looked like this. Not as nice, is it? to really understand how we got this out of this, we have to dive into the chemistry of concrete floors. Here are the basic building blocks of concrete: small aggregate, large aggregate, and cement paste. This is what holds everything together and makes concrete hard. But in with that hard cement is calcium hydroxide. It is left over from the hydration process, and it isn't hard like the rest of the slab. In fact, it is actually pretty soft. If this stuff is left in your floor, it reacts with carbon dioxide in the air, turns into a chalky dust, and you end up with a thin layer of dust on everything in the building. Densification is the process of applying a liquid silicate hardener to the concrete to get rid of that calcium hydroxide. That makes the floor stronger against wear and tear, so it will look better and last longer. Now, a concrete slab is usually 4 to 6 inches thick, but all the wear and tear happens in the top 16th inch wear zone of the concrete. That's where the concrete is most vulnerable, so most hardeners target all their power there. And different chemical hardeners do this in different ways. The most common are sodium silicate and potassium silicates. These chemicals react with that soft calcium hydroxide and turn it into calcium silicate hydrate, which is a much harder molecule. The application of a sodium or potassium silicate most often involves repeatedly scrubbing them into the floor and flushing with water. This generates hazardous wastewater that needs to be disposed of properly. A colloidal silica works differently. It fills small pores in the concrete with silica. This makes the concrete stronger. But there is little chemical reaction that takes place, so most of the soft calcium hydroxide remains in the floor. Compared to other chemicals, lithium silicate technology is a relative newcomer to concrete floors. Like sodium or potassium silicates, lithium silicates are reactive, so they turn the soft calcium hydroxide into hard calcium silicate hydrate, but they don't have to be scrubbed and flushed, so they are easier to apply and don't generate any hazardous wastewater. Lithium silicates are often more expensive per gallon, but lithium silicates are more reactive, so they make the concrete harder and have higher coverage rates than other hardeners, so you end up buying fewer gallons for the floor. For these reasons, lithium silicates are quickly growing in popularity in the industry. And it's why Proseco's...
Okay. So we'll move on because I don't want to go into the advertisement portion of these.
And Solidec line is based around lithium silicate technology. The decision of how to...
All right. But I do want to share with you guys the next video also from Proseco. And by the way, they are one of the leading manufacturers of chemicals for polished concrete industry. They make a variety of stuff. Them, a company called Ameripolish, are two of the biggest manufacturers out there. So I'll show you how they actually apply this densifier and how it works in this next video. And by the way, what I want you to notice is how they apply it and then how it is applied in our full video that I'll show in just a minute.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue our process as we bring the rest of this floor. We've got this floor up to 400 currently, and that's where we like to put our densifier on. That's what we've done in our finished areas as well, is stop at 400, apply the densification to the floor, and then continue our process with the 800s and then 15. So what we're going to do is we're going to start spraying out the LS densifier. We haven't diluted it. This is straight out of the box. Go ahead and put your pad on the floor, tuck here, and let's pre-wet or preload that pad with some of the densifier. And then we can go ahead and start applying the densifier, find our path, and then we're going to use the microfiber pad to just evenly distribute the densifier across that surface. We like to have the guys sort of work together, never have so much of this out there that we've got it soaking into areas while it's not getting into other areas. We want to get this pretty much evenly distributed across the floor that we're going to be treating. We like to see an even absorption rate. If we don't see that, then we're going to come back and do a second application of the LS so that we can find the areas where it's reached enough or reached its saturation point, redistribute it to the areas where it's still needed. It's important that we see a nice even film of the LS across the floor. We don't want to see puddles. We don't want to see a lot of streakiness. That can present problems as we go to our next step and cut it with the diamonds. So the guys are doing a nice job here in terms of getting it distributed across the floor. Because of the denseness of the floor that we're dealing with here with the hard trowel finish and the cream polishing, we're finding just one application is enough to thoroughly densify the floor, harden it properly, and get the properties that we're looking for. If your concrete's very porous, weaker concrete, 2 or 3 applications may be required of the LS. It's always good to work with your samples and determine yourself which works, how many applications and what the rate is going to do for your floor. Coverage rates that we're finding on most jobs is we're going to get about 1,000 square feet to a gallon. I typically like to, in most cases, we'll do 2 coats where we're applying about 2/3 of that material on the first coat and the balance of that 1/3 of a gallon on a second coat. Other areas where we were pre-treating yesterday, we're probably lucky to get 300 or 400 square feet to the gallon is my guess. So again, it's really the testing you do. Doing your samples is always important.
So
In terms of what it is you're trying.
with the with what we were looking at there with these densifiers, the key that we were looking for is that we want it applied. This is not a topical coat. This is not something like a floor finish like we applied the other day that is left on top. It is penetrating into that 1/16 of an inch of the floor. It is reacting with that calcium that is in the floor, the calcium hydroxide. And when I say it's reacting, it literally, I've seen this done in a little bottle where we took some calcium, we put some densifier, and then shook it up, and literally it'll create like a gel material. And as it dries, that gel will harden up, and that creates that hardness that we're looking for in the concrete. Because otherwise what will happen is if we don't do that step, as he mentioned in the whiteboard animation, that powder, that calcium hydroxide that's in the floor will react with the air and you will get a lot of dust. So if you go into a building that's got concrete floors that are old, you're going to notice they're sweeping those floors a lot to keep the dust down. Especially in old warehouse buildings, you'll see this. The idea of polishing it. In fact, some old warehouses have gone to the route of just doing a quick light grind to the floor. They call it a grind and seal, and they'll heavily densify it to eliminate that powdering issue, and they'll do a quick polish. So it's a fast process, but it's there because they're having such bad powdering issues. All right, so let's go back over to our slideshow and we'll finish up with understanding of this process. So after the floor is polished, all right, so after we have done the process of grinding it, we apply a densifier. A lot of times chemical densifiers, because it's a chemical reaction, we want to give them time to set up, to react. I like to give them a minimum of 12 hours. In the video that I'll show you, he does not give it that kind of time. And to me, I don't like that he doesn't do that, but I wanted you guys to see the process. He does a good job of showing the process, but that's a flaw in his system. You'll notice in this picture how nice and just smooth and flat. Occasionally what will happen is to protect a floor, and in this case, this is a multi-purpose room, we will put on what is called a guard. Guards are not a floor wax. They might look like wax. They're applied very similarly where they're sprayed on. But it's not quite as topical as a floor finish is in that they don't form a very flat layer. They actually will fill in the pores and kind of contour to the concrete itself. So it has a combination of some densifier in there with some acrylic components. They are semi-topical, okay? So they leave a very thin layer of coating on the floor, but we don't want to build them up heavily like we do floor finish. So remember with floor finish, we're going to put lots of coats on there. This, 1 or 2 coats is all that is ever necessary. Very thin, almost impossible to scratch. If you build it up too heavily, what will happen is the guard starts to scratch and you can see it more. And we don't want that. But the benefit of a guard, what it does in working closely with that densifier, is the guard helps to form a little bit of a seal to protect against staining. So that guard is what we call a sacrificial coating. It's meant to be put in harm's way to protect the flooring from staining. Because the one problem with concrete floors, this is the only major issue, is a polished concrete floor, if you pour acids on it, it will etch the concrete. Now, it will typically only etch that top 16th layer, so we can fix it by easily just grinding and smoothing it out and bringing it back up to the same level of polish. But from the standpoint of taking the brunt of the stain, that's what a guard does. It gives you time in those issues. So a lot of times you'll see us put guards on floors that are going to be more likely stained. For example, in a grocery store where spills happen often, somebody drops a bottle of pickles and it breaks open. The pickle juice has got vinegar in it. That will etch the floor. Mark, your question.
Does that guard apply the same way as finish?
Very similar. The way you saw the gentleman who were doing the densifier spraying it on and using a microfiber, but you do apply it in the form of, you don't walk on it like you would a densifier. You can walk in densifier. This, you don't want to do that because you'll leave the footprints.
Get away.
While it's still wet. Again, it's much thinner. But you spray it on. You don't apply it thick. Spray it on, use a microfiber. Best way to apply it.
Go.
Now, what about the slurry that's generated? Okay, Nelson, I'll answer your question before I move on.
So the guard is like.
You're muted again, Nelson.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I was saying the guard is like the final step when you apply the floor finish. So the guard will protect the floor finish.
It'll protect the polished concrete. There's no floor finish here.
Yeah, polished concrete.
Yep. But yes, the guard is going to be much like a floor finish in the way it serves as a protection. I will say this, that a lot of floors, I'm not a fan of putting guard on every floor because a polished concrete floor doesn't need to have a guard. Okay. The only reason we would put it on is if that floor is going to be susceptible to staining. So for example, if I have a polished concrete floor in the lobby to an auditorium, people aren't eating and drinking in that lobby. They don't allow food and drinks in those areas. So from that standpoint, what's it going to be? Dust, dirt, sand? That's going to affect everything. So I won't put a guard on it. The same is going to be true maybe in a classroom. I wouldn't necessarily put a guard on a floor that is polished in a classroom, but I would in a multi-purpose room. So, there's areas where I am going to use a guard and areas I'm not. Interestingly, and I'll share with you guys this story. Let me go back that slide. So currently, over at 2 different schools, they have a polished concrete floor that does not have a guard on it. That I personally have been at. One is Prairie Elementary. Prairie Elementary, we did that floor. It's going on 4 years ago now, I believe. And when we originally did that floor, we did put a protective guard on it.
Oh God.
However, as a test, they just decided to strip it off. And the good thing with guards is they come off real easily. So they stripped it off with just a little bit of chemical stripper. And they went to using a diamond polishing pad, which I'll show you in the maintenance system here. That diamond polishing pad, this one is made by Twister, continues to polish the floor with a very high grit. Usually it's about a 1500 or 2000 grit diamond on the pad. And as a result, the floors itself stay polished, and they also don't need to ever be, we're not worried about staining nearly as bad because we're maintaining it with that. So interestingly enough, Costco switched over from this system because Costco used to use a guard developed by 3M. And they found that they were spending millions of dollars for all the stores because they were reapplying the guard regularly, usually every month or two, especially in the front entrance. They stopped doing that and they went to this diamond impregnated pad system. And unbelievable, the floors are still looking beautiful. Mark, and then Tony, I know you had a question, so I'll come back to you as well. Mark.
How can you tell if there's a guard on there or not?
Really, it's a tough way to tell. The easiest way is just to do a chemical test. I will usually take a chemical stripper because alkaline won't hurt a diamond polished concrete. But I'll take that, and if I apply just a little stripper in a corner out of the way where nobody can see, and I'll put just maybe a quarter size amount and scrub that with a little pad. If you start to feel it getting slick and remove, you could tell there was a guard there because you could feel it. It's a chemical. You won't really be able to see it per se unless it's really a very too thick of a guard. And some companies will use that, and you'll see a lot of scratches in the guard itself because the guard's taking the scratches. So, for example, Winco uses a chemical guard because of the high volume of traffic, and because they're a 24-hour store, they chose to go that route. Whereas Costco, they have the ability to be scrubbing their floors all night long, and it's a little slower process, but it works incredibly well. Tony, you had a question earlier?
No, I mean, just in that video when that guy had his workers applying that, and he stated something to the effect of 1,000 square feet per gallon, and in some cases it's 300 and 400 square feet. What scenario would need that much product?
So keep in mind they're a national manufacturer, and concrete on one side of the country is not the same as concrete on the other side.
Okay.
A very soft, porous concrete. And I'll give you an example. I did a project in New Jersey about 5 years ago. And I was out there on the Jersey Shores area. And their busiest time of year, this area is dead in the wintertime. But from Memorial Day to Labor Day, everybody comes down from the cities to the Jersey Shores to spend weekends, to spend a week. They'll do their timeshares, whatever. So this store was out along Long Island areas, south of Long Island, down along the Jersey Shore. And it was really neat because you drive over a bridge, you're out on this island area, and there was a grocery store. It was a chain of stores. It's owned from a company back in Texas. But anyway, this store, the concrete was so soft that when we went to apply our material, it just soaked into the floor. When we densified, the coverage rate was very low. We were using diamonds, and this was where I learned a lot about diamonds. We were using diamonds that we had shipped from California. And what was happening is we were burning up our diamonds very quickly because we were using the wrong kind of diamonds. We were using soft diamonds on a soft concrete floor, and they were glazing over. They just were not working well. We had to get the right diamonds for the floor. And in the case of the guard and the densifier, our coverage rates were much lower because it was such a soft, porous floor. And that has to do with the ingredients, because what happens is when concrete companies are getting the Portland cement and mixing it, it's based on what they have in their ground, their soil there. So that's why concrete in one area of the country will be different from concrete in another area of the country.
So when you were applying that, were you just standing in a pool of slurry, and you knew it was soft and porous?
Yeah, we had so much slurry from our first cut. I was a little bit taken aback by it.
Yeah.
And then our diamonds were burning up. We were checking our diamonds, and they were burning up in about maybe a tenth of the time that it would take for our diamonds to last. Because typically we can get diamonds to last 5,000 to 10,000 square feet. We were burning them up of just a few thousand square feet. So we had to reduce the size of the area we were doing. And the contractor doing the job, we had to order overnight diamonds shipped into us so that we could get the job finished. So it became a little bit of a challenge, but we were able to adjust and get the right diamonds, and we got the problems solved. So, and that's where, it's a learning experience, but after that, I went back and wanted to learn a lot more about why that was the case. And it just happens to deal with how concrete differs. Okay, so that slurry, what's left over, is going to be filled up into a drum like this because we're dealing with wet material. And it's got water, it's got soil, but it's also got dry concrete in there that is mixed in. Some areas of the company or of the country, some counties in the state, list concrete slurry as a hazardous waste. Not all areas do. Some have no problem with it being poured out into the ground. Most have gotten away from that, and they don't allow for that. But the biggest problem you have is you can't just pour this down the drain. Now, what I have seen is companies who will create a slurry pond if they're doing huge amounts of it. But even that, they're finding it's not as effective. And one of the biggest problems, even though concrete will separate from the water on its own, as soon as I start to agitate that water, that mud that's in the bottom will start to mix in with the concrete. Plus, the water itself, because concrete is very high alkaline. Okay, it has a lot of lye in it. So from that standpoint, because it's high in alkalinity, that's also why we can't put floor finish on concrete. It doesn't stick well because of the high alkalinity. We will typically use a chemical that we will mix in with this. And when we mix in the chemical, what ends up happening is that it separates out, much like you see in this picture here, the water from the concrete material. And the concrete material will start to stick to this substance that we'll add into it. We call it a slurry mix or a separator mix. And it grabs a hold of all the concrete, reduces the pH level so that the water itself can be sucked out and then put right down the drain because it's low enough pH and it doesn't have any concrete left in it. What's left over in a material, we add a little bit of a drying agent, and it is something that looks almost like kitty litter when it's done, and it can be disposed of through just putting it out in the garbage. so it's very safe to be able to dispose of that way. So there is a process of being able to take this slurry and turn it into that material and dispose of it. So that's kind of how they get rid of the material. So last part I'll touch on is how do we maintain a polished concrete floor? I mentioned that maintenance is a lot easier. Well, the most important thing, like with all floors, is protect it using a good matting program. We always want to remove dry soils from floors because dry soils will eventually wear the floor out. So sweeping and dust mopping on a daily basis, damp mopping to remove sticky, oily substances, and then periodically, if we need to restore the gloss, we can do it in a couple ways. If we're dealing with a floor that does not have a guard, they'll use diamond pads. If it has a guard on it, they might use a specialty diamond pad that's for a guard, or a white floor pad with a propane buffer. And then if it starts to really wear out, then you'll find periodically they will refresh it with what we call a scrub and recoat. Again, that is only going to be on a guarded floor. So that's the process that Winco uses. And that's why Costco went away from this and went to a diamond pad program, because they don't ever have to go through a refresh process. In comparison, if you go into Lowe's or Home Depot, you'll find all they're doing is removing the dry soils. They'll run an auto scrubber to clean their floors. And then every 5 years or so, they'll bring in a company to redo the floors, because over time it is worn down, and they'll refresh it. And the good thing about that, when I say refresh it, they'll basically repolish the area. But each time you do, that floor lasts longer, because the harder it gets, the denser it gets through age and through adding of chemical densifiers and polishing. That floor gets harder and harder, to the point that you may go 10 years before you have to ever do anything of a repolish to it. And as I mentioned, entrance mats. Always, 80% of soil entering the building can be captured through entrance mats. So daily cleaning using an auto scrubber works well. And here's burnishing using a propane burnisher. So, all right. A lot of information in that. I want to show you guys basically what this looks like. And this video is a little bit long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cut through some of this stuff, because it's just so long. It's like 35-40 minutes. So we'll jump through a few things. Give me a second here to load that video. So let me explain the area that he is doing first. This is a small shop or office that was added onto a piece of property. It's about 300 square feet, so not a large area. They have brought out all their equipment, and they're running all their equipment off of a generator that they bring with them, the polishers do. So in this particular case, all of this stuff is running off of a generator that they have outside. And some of their equipment, these large grinding machines, are running off of 3-phase power. So it's sucking a lot of power for these, but they're big, heavy-duty machines. So let's go through this. And again, I'm going to jump ahead in a few spots.
Set up in here now. We have our saw hooked up to our vacuum. We have our grinder in here. we were discussing diamonds. So right now we have a 40 grit soft bond diamond. This concrete's really hard, so we're gonna end up putting on a 40 grit super soft compound diamond, which is what you need to cut into this concrete. You can just tell by looking at it, this is extremely hard. So actually,
One thing I will address real quick here. This is a new construction, and later in the video at the end, you're going to see something about what it looks like. There's a lot of moisture in this concrete, even though it's very hard. And in all honesty, I'm not a big fan of doing polished concrete on a new slab like this, just because of one of the problems that you're going to see called crazing, which I don't like the look of, but some people do. So I will point that out to you guys.
I'm just going to go over diamond compounds really quick. And here's our saw. I'm going to plunge cut, I don't know, about an inch and a quarter. That blade's not all the way down, just to clean this out before we fill the joint. So we're going to go over diamonds now. So now I know I've mentioned diamonds before, but when you're dealing with the diamonds on these floors, you have to have every grit diamond. We normally start at 40 grit and we turn the boxes upside down when they're mounted on the machine, but 40 grit to 150. These are all the metal bond diamonds that you have to have in each compound. So $400 or $500, they're very expensive.
He spends a lot of time talking about all the different
A
diamonds.
small shot blaster, and we have a lot of equipment to make this happen. And of course our generator, just getting ready to turn that on now. I kind of got off on a tangent. Okay, so getting back to this. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna cut this joint open just to clean the walls of the joint. We're gonna fill that with the polyurea joint filler. Then we're gonna get set up to grind the whole floor. So what I wanted to show you here, I know that wasn't much to really see, but I did that twice, and these blades are narrower than the saw cut. So I actually drag the blade down the left edge and then the right edge. So I do it twice to get that joint clear. So now the joint's clear, we're gonna fill this joint, and then we're gonna get ready to polish. So a lot of people in the past have asked me when we're filling these joints what the equipment is, that electric gun. So you just purge a little bit in the bag. Now that's mixed. Of course, my bag is leaking naturally. All right, and we start at the end.
While he's doing this, I'll kind of talk. The material he's using is called a polyurea material. What a polyurea is it's a flexible material. When we have saw cuts in a concrete, they're there so that the concrete can expand and contract a little bit, and so the concrete doesn't crack. We don't want to fill it with a very hard substance like a cement, because then it'll crack and chip out. These polyureas are designed to be flexible, get deep into the crack. He went about 1.5 inches down just to make sure he had that saw cut nice and cleaned out. The reason why you typically will fill this with that compound is just for it to look like a finished floor. If we leave that, that's going to be areas where dirt and soil will eventually kind of get into there. He'll finish this area up. They'll let it sit up for about 10 to 15 minutes on the floor. And then you're going to see here in just a minute, they'll come through, they'll get all their diamonds ready.
Weird. This is just not going to update.
Now their vacuum system is a 3-inch vacuum line. But notice what he's going to do. After it's set up, and it'll cure pretty quick, they'll cut off the excess material off the top so it'll be ready for them in the polishing step. So let's jump ahead to them beginning the grinding and polishing. They're going to start, as he mentioned, with the 40 grit diamond with the grinding of the floors. And they've got their vacuum lines all set up. One of the things he's going to do is start along the edge. He'll take his machine, get it started. He'll go as close as he can with the machine. And so this is a little bit reverse of what we do with stripping floors. He's going to grind as close as he can to that wall. And then what he'll do is he'll take a hand grinder and work that edge. So a very heavy duty machine. These are designed that one man can't operate them. They even make them now with remote control systems. But what's nice is I wanted you guys to see this, and I can point it out. Because of the heads on it, it's creating what's called a scratch pattern. Okay, and you'll notice as it's turning, you've got these scratches, and it's basically opening up the concrete, taking that cream off of the concrete, and at this point,
Oh God, I'm bleeding now.
the vacuum system's picking up a lot of that dust, so it's not being exposed. But just as a second safety step, the operator is also wearing a respirator, just so that he's not breathing any of that silica dust that might escape. That is part of the OSHA regulation, by the way, is if you're going to be doing it dry, you are required to have not only the HEPA filter vacuum system, but also have a respirator that you're wearing, and it needs to be properly fitted. So they'll go over the entire floor, starting with the edges. The reason why you see them put them water down is they started to run into issues with their diamonds getting hot. That's why I like to do this as a wet system, not just for safety, but the diamonds last longer. And they can't flood it on because otherwise it'll make it a muddy mess for their vacuum system. They ended up having to go over this floor about 3 times to get the cut that they wanted. And this is a great picture for you guys to see. Show that again. That's the vacuum, all the dust, the concrete that was removed in that. So that's a lot of material of concrete dust that was removed. And that basically is Portland cement dust. And it contains silica. And again, silica is something that you don't want to breathe. It's hazardous for you. So this is a good shot here. You can see the exposed aggregate on the floor, because what they've done is they've cut that cream off of the concrete. Now we're seeing the small little aggregate pieces and the larger chunks of aggregate. And you can see that a nice look all over the floor. The one thing to know about polished concrete is, as a polisher, they can't control what it's going to look like underneath. What's that aggregate looking like? Any of those issues are going to be there. There's not a whole lot they can do to control that. They did it a third pass, and they got even more exposure. Okay. Now there's still some dust left on the floor. They've changed their diamonds out, and now they're going to go from a 40 grit up to an 80 grit in this next
Dave, when the
passage.
diamonds get hot, how do you know? Does it show a sign on the floor that they're getting
Yes,
hot? Or...
and you're going to see it because he's going to show you something where you can see it here in this next. So I'll show you that in a minute. So right now, before he does that next pass, he's going to do all of his edge work. I like this little sled that he has because it's pretty cool to be able to move around with. But notice he's still wearing a respirator, ear protection because of the noises. Now, in just a minute, you'll be able to see some of this. I'm going to turn his audio back on for a minute.
That actually is metal burn on the surface just from the heat of the diamonds.
Does that answer your question, Mark? Did you see that?
Yes, I got it. Thank you.
You see a lot of that on this. You see all that diamond burn there? That's because of...
Okay, as we continue around with the 80 bond diamond, it's very important that you get all the scratches out from the 40s. So we take our time, do this one real slow to get all the scratches out. Otherwise, they're going to come back to haunt you, and you're not going to find out until you're almost done with the floor.
I will tell you, if you run into that issue where you're doing the diamond cutting and you didn't get all the scratches out, you actually have to go back down to a lower grit to remove them and then bring it back up again. So it's a good idea to, just be slow, take your time, do it right.
All right, well, Chapter's finishing up those cables. Moving along, it'll be done in a minute there. These are the 150s. These are mounted on a plate. These plates are actually aluminum, and they're lightweight. It keeps the temperature down. These diamonds, by the way, when you're cutting, if they go over about 220 degrees, they get so hot that they glaze over. Once they glaze over, they don't cut at all. So it's very important that you keep diamonds cool. So what I was doing earlier in the video is I was pouring water in front of the grinder to keep the diamonds cool. Kind of a little trick, but that works. As soon as the tip is done, we're going to swap these out. Keep going.
So they'll progressively go up in diamonds. They'll switch it out like he was just talking about.
Okay, Jeff is now on the...
And each new diamond creates its own scratch pattern to remove the one before. You can see it still has a little bit of it, but it's a new scratch pattern. He's pointing out these are the resin diamonds. So the one he was using before is a metal. This is a resin. And those are going up to a 400 grit.
Oh, fuck this. I ain't going this way.
All right. So now what they're doing, and this is something I wanted to point out. Remember when on the Proseco video, you saw the way they applied the densifier? And he put it on with an applicator pad. What he's doing here is just a quick mist of it. And partly is, he said earlier that the floor itself was extremely hard. So a hard floor doesn't need as much densifier, but this is a case of almost why does it even matter? Because what he's doing is he's not allowing the chemical to do its job. When he hits this floor in a few minutes, he's going to be removing almost everything he put off because he didn't allow the chemical to really react, and he's not putting enough of it down to allow it. You also see these little micro cracks. That's called crazing. It's almost like an alligator skin. This is because the concrete itself was extremely hard concrete, and number two, possibly a little fresh. However, I will tell you, this happens even with older concrete. We had a building at Surtec where I used to work, and it was a 15-year-old building, but the slab was so incredibly hard that when we started to grind and cut it open, we would see these microfissure cracks, this crazy. And it's just that concrete. There was nothing that you could do to fix it. It's not a crack, it's just the look of it. So
concrete to harden the surface before we run the 100 resins. Now I'm going to run a 400 grit copper bond diamond around the perimeter to just remove scratches from that edge, even though I did it once, but I'll go around one time quick to get any scratches out. And then we're going to continue with the 100 grit resins on the large grinder.
Okay, so I just got done running the edges with the hand grinder. So obviously they look a little bit different now. These are the 100 grit resin bond pucks. Just getting ready.
Because there were some scratches that remained, so Jeff is running that edge really tight with the grinder. Edges are always the toughest part of any of these floors. Okay, now we're switching out. We're putting the 200 resins on here. We're going to do the same thing again, and then we're going to run the grinder the opposite direction, which you always run perpendicular every path so you don't get tracks in the floor, or that's what you try to eliminate. Consistency is king here, so you're always trying to be as consistent as possible on every pass over the floor so you don't leave marks. Now we're going to switch out. We're going to put the 400s on and do it again. Okay, so now we are running the 800 grit diamond impregnated pad underneath the grinder. You can start to see the shine now for sure, but what you start to see now is the character coming out in the floor. And I know I mentioned this multiple times in the video, but this is all stuff that comes out of the concrete. We can't control any of it, but you see the stone exposure, you start to see, it's called Craze Cracks, those little cracks on the surface. It's all starting to come out now.
So this is the final polish.
All right, so at this point you see me crawl around the perimeter, checking the edges, and I notice we have resin burn around the perimeter. So we put on another set of 800 grit impregnated pads to try to get that resin burn out. I quickly do the edge with another 400 grit pass just to get that resin burn up. And then we're gonna rerun the grinder around the perimeter to get rid of any of the marks.
Okay, so now we ran the 800 grit pads. You definitely see that reflection now. We have to put the guard down and then burnish this. Now there's a lot of travel marks in the concrete here. Apparently these edges drop down pretty hard, which is common when finishers go around the edges. And they're all polished, they're all smooth, but they look different. This is part of the polished concrete thing that you have to accept. This is an organic floor that you can't really control. The other thing too is these are what they call craze cracks in the surface. These really weren't even noticeable before we started, but when we start grinding and they come out, they kind of become exposed. So our client here actually loves this look, so he is super happy with this, but this is all opinion driven. I mean, some people like these type of floors, some people don't. So I try to go to great lengths to explain what a floor may or may not look like. All I can really guarantee is that it's going to be glossy when we're done, and that's about it. So we're going to put this guard down. I'll take another walk through when we're done, and that's it for today. All right, so we mopped the guard on here, which actually makes it look a little hazy. Now we're going to run our burnisher over the floor, propane burnisher. So we're going to burnish this. I have to figure out where I can put this camera so I don't run over it. Okay, so I just got done. Check out the reflection on this floor. And that is like a mirror, it truly is. So like I always mention with polished concrete, you really can't control what's in the concrete. So if you look down, you see those craze cracks in there, that's all in the concrete. There's nothing you can do about that. But what great reflectivity in this floor. Everything that's in.
All right. So, Nelson, you had a question.
Yeah, so when there was spraying the application on the floor, what's the time they need to let that set to order to work?
So for the densifier, I like to give that minimum of 12 hours. Okay, if I can give it 24, great, but I always like a minimum of 12 hours. Secondly, regarding the guard that was put on at the end, guards will dry in 15 to 20 minutes. So after they dry, we can burnish them with a white pad and they will bring that luster up really nicely. Remember, the guard is there only as a protective coating. He only applied one coat, doesn't need multiple coats. If you do more than one, never go more than two. Anything more than two will get a buildup and you will see it and it doesn't look natural. So one coat is sufficient. There's a polisher that I dealt with down in Downey, California, and he was absolutely set against using guards unless the architect required it. So why am I showing you guys this? Okay. The reason why this is so educational, why it's important for me to show it to you, is one, we are changing. We talked about stripping and waxing floors. Stripping and waxing floors is going away. We are going away from resilient flooring. If you are in the business of selling flooring, resilient flooring business is decreasing huge. The companies who make floor finishes are going away from making floor finishes because people don't like to strip and wax floors. So from that standpoint, we have to be aware of all the other kinds of floors and how do we get them there? And when you understand how we achieve that floor, then we can understand a little bit more about what it is and how do we maintain it. The great thing about polished concrete is once it's done that way, there's not a whole lot you have to do, just keep it clean. And then if it has to be refreshed, they'll come in and repolish it. That same process could have been done without that heavy machine using a wet dry vac and a weighted floor machine like the Clark or a swing buffer like we had with weights on it. It does just as good of a job. And in all honesty, he was dealing with a lot of setup time. It was great because he did less passes. That's the real advantage of it, is his coverage rate is much faster. And because of the weight of the machine, he can do it in just a couple passes. He goes one direction, then the other, and he was done. The only time he had to do multiple passes over a floor was if his diamonds were glazing over, and again, that was because of doing it dry, or in the first cut he did to get that look he was looking for. That one's the crucial. That's the one that you want to get it as even as possible. So any questions about this? There was a lot there, and nobody's expecting you guys to go out and become polished concrete professionals. But what I want you to be aware of is that process, because within our world, it is now another pathway. A lot of guys who've been in the janitorial side have really begun to learn this process because they're familiar with use of the equipment and have become experts at polished concrete. A lot of janitors and custodians have really taken this on, and it's just another area that you can become that expert. You can actually get where your organization, your schools, or if you're working for a contractor, they'll now go after that business. And the company I used to work for, Integrity, they have a separate crew. That's all they do is polish concrete work. They're the specialists. So, Nelson.
Yeah, I have a question. So,
Yes, sir.
like for a residential home, when you have a home built, instead of using carpet, you can also you can also change to polished concrete instead of carpet.
I don't know if builders are doing that yet in the building specs, but I know in custom builds I see it a lot. It's a very common. If it's done in the initial phase, they do a few things that will help. One, they tend to how they finish the floor. They'll make sure it's finished better. I will also say a residential concrete slab and a commercial concrete slab are significantly different. Residential, if you go pulling up the carpet in your house, a lot of times you're going to find a lot of cracks in the concrete. And especially in a home that is built in a tract or subdivision. The reason being, they do it fast. They're pouring a lot of concrete, and those guys are not finishing it for a finished look. Whereas in a commercial application, a lot of times they are taking their time and they'll do it so that it could be finished for polished concrete or other flooring. So that's just one of the things to be aware of. You'll also find the concrete a lot of times used in residential is a softer concrete mix. So when they know that they're doing it for polished concrete, they'll order a pour that is a harder mix. Almost all commercial is done that way. And you got to think about why. In a commercial environment, okay, grocery store, warehouse building, large building, they're running forklifts, pallet jacks, heavy equipment on those things. They make sure that the concrete is strong and durable to take that kind of abuse. In a residential environment, we're not putting it through that. So the concrete itself is not the same consistency. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just some things you have to be aware of. So it might take more densifier in the polishing process. Okay. So it was a lot of information, as I mentioned. When we touch on Friday the marble and granite, that will be a little faster, but it's still the idea of those are ground and they're simply using a wet system. Now think about it. Granite is a very hard stone, right? So we use the principle, soft diamonds, hard stone. Okay, soft stone, hard diamonds. We would use a very soft diamond mix for doing polishing of granite surfaces. That's a very typical case. Number two thing, granite a lot of times is polished in the factory because they can get very consistent when they're doing the granite slabs or granite tiles. They will do all the polishing there. The only time we ever have to deal with repolishing it is if there is a problem with what we'll call lippage. And we'll go over that on Friday's class. Okay, so changing gears, talked a lot about polished concrete. I mentioned I wanted to come back to this idea of coverage rates. So give me a second here. I'm going to share with you something, and where you're going to be able to find that. So within the Google Classroom, in classwork, I put in here under the final project ISSA cleaning times. And if you click on that, you'll be able to see the material that I'm going to share with you. And it's a PDF, so you can download if you want. But let me share with you what this looks like and what it is. So if you went to a body shop for your car, you got in an accident with your car, and you take it to a body shop, the body shop guys will estimate how long it takes to do each individual step of the repair. That's how they do their estimate. They'll figure how much it takes to remove all the stuff, how much time it takes for taping, how much time it's going to take for them to sand the surface and prep it, how much time for painting, all those things, dent repair, everything. They're going to put all that into it, plus the amount of materials. Our industry has the same thing, and these are industry standard cleaning times. The way these standards have been developed is they were developed over a period of years through what we call time studies. An organization would literally take and measure a number of people, usually half a dozen people, how long does it take them, and then they'll find the average amount of time. When we look at this, this does not mean that it's always going to be exactly that time, but it gives us an idea of how long it would take. When we're estimating for work, okay, this is how we do it. If we are doing where we have to estimate how much time it takes to fill up a trigger sprayer, empty and rinse and fill up a trigger sprayer, okay, it takes 0.2 minutes. Literally, they've gone through and done all these estimates. Whereas if we're going to fill up a 100-gallon container, based on flow rates of water, it would take 25 minutes. What I want you guys to do, I'm going to use this to kind of educate you with it. And we're not going to do an exercise today on it, but we will do an exercise on Friday. I wanted you guys to get familiar with this. You'll notice it covers classroom cleaning. So how long does it take to do trash, dust with a duster and do the chalkboard and dust off the floor? Well, we can do 1,000 square feet in about 9.4 minutes. But if we had to do where we're doing maybe vacuuming it, that could increase to, with an upright vacuum, 14 minutes to do that area. Here is a good one. Trash and dust the room with a backpack vacuum, clean the chalkboard, and then backpack vacuum the floor. 1,000 square feet takes 11 minutes. I wanted to scroll down and share with you the information related to what we did in floor care. So, by the way, this also covers stuff for medical. That's the reason I chose this one. So it'll fit for both groups, healthcare and schools. Okay, so we scroll here to areas and we get past carpet. This particular worksheet that you guys will use, this will cover all the areas that we will cover in the course of our class. Remember the procedures you guys outlined for doing the floors? Okay, one of the first physical procedures was that you guys did dust mopping, right? So we dust mopped the floor with a 30-inch dust mop. And if you look here on line 367, we'll go all the way across. Here's how we use this to determine it. And I'm sharing with you it. I'm going to explain it, but then I'm going to do a little bit of a whiteboard. This is based on cleaning 1,000 square foot. It would take us approximately 6 minutes to dust mop 1,000 square feet. Now, if we were dealing with a smaller area or larger area than that, we really need to know how much time is it per square foot. So real simple formula to use is we will take the amount of minutes, 6 minutes, divide it by 1,000, the amount of square footage it's saying, and this will tell us how much time it will take per square foot. So we'll take 6 divided by 1,000, and that is 0.006. Okay. Who remembers how much square footage we cleaned the other day on Saturday? Anybody? It was 400 square feet. So we will take that 0.006 and multiply it times 400. And that means it would take us about 2.5 minutes, 2.4 minutes to dust mop that floor. Does that sound about right? It didn't take long to dust mop those 2 floors, did it? So that was one of the first steps. Okay. Then it'll talk about scrubbing. And now when they use this scrubbing with the different machines, that also implies the amount of time that would imply applying whatever solution that you're going to use for scrubbing it. So we need to know the size of the machine. The other day the question was asked, does the size affect it? Absolutely. So now we look at scrubbing the floor with a 175 RPM, that was that low speed, with a separate pickup. It would take this amount of time. Okay. So let's write that down because we're going to use that to do our math here in just a second. And then I'm going to do a whiteboard just to kind of demonstrate it. I will put this into the Google Classroom so that you guys will have it. So we said it's 27 minutes, right? We're going to divide that by 1,000, and that will help us to figure out our math. So I'm going to stop my share here, and I'm going to share from my whiteboard. And I'll do the math for you. So we take 27 minutes per 1,000 square feet. We'll divide it by 1,000. And that gives us a number of 0.27. Okay. Now we only did 400 square feet, right? Actually 0.027. Sorry, guys. 0.027. So we'll take that 0.027, multiply it times 400, because that's how much we did. To scrub that floor would take about 10.8 minutes just to scrub it. That's not too bad, and that's just one pass over. If we had to do twice over it, we would double it. So do you guys understand how this is working? Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if you guys feel like it makes sense.
Hey Dave, so the 0.027, is that the actual time? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, that's the actual amount of time per square foot.
Correct. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Thumbs up.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Now, you guys are going to help each other with this. So what we will do, I'm going to leave this in the Google Classroom, that worksheet that has all the times on there. And you're going to take, for your areas, we're going to take that same process that you guys had written out, okay? You described in your homework assignment this week, what was the steps. You're going to use that timesheet to be able to figure out, based on the square footage for your building, how much time it would take to do that. So that's why I asked you guys to, ahead of time, think about your building. We're now going to have to identify on Friday, what is our square footage of hard flooring for either the multi-purpose room or for the lobby and common areas. So you guys will use your square footage as a group in your breakout rooms. You will then take and use this time study to help you guys determine how much time it will take to do that area. So our goal is to be able to come up with how much time and how much chemicals, because we had the formulas for coverage. This is where we now start to understand the whole process. We have to pull it all together. So in the basic class, you guys simply had to say, what does it take to do an area? Now you're saying, how much time do I need? How much materials do I need? All those things. It all comes together as one thing. And based on what we described as a process, for example, if we said in the multi-purpose room, we're going to strip and wax it once a year, this will tell you how much time it's going to take for us to strip and wax. So we will, part of your proposal is you're going to have your daily floor care process. And this is how much time it takes per day to clean that area. And then you're going to have my project work. How much time I'm going to spend on project work. If I'm stripping and waxing once a year and that's the only thing I do for it, that's my project work. If I'm doing it 2 or 3 times a year, then I'm going to have to multiply it even further out. So that's basically how we're going to wrap up this session. On Friday, we are going to spend about 40 minutes doing the wrap up on other stone floors and then wood floors. And then we will jump over to this for the rest of our session on Friday. Okay? That makes sense?
So are we doing it then?
You are. You're going to be actually doing some of that for the hard floor. You guys will do it as a group. Okay? So remember what the reason I gave you that final project at the beginning is I want you guys establishing this stuff as we go along. You're not going to wait till the end to pull it all together. We're applying it. We just talked about hard floors. Get your hard floor process down. Then we will move on to carpets. Get your carpet process down. When we get to the above floor, get that, whatever we have to do for that. How long is it going to take to clean that area? And the same with window cleaning, all those areas. We will, by the time you finish this class, you'll be able to describe how you clean it, what materials you're going to need, all your equipment, plus how long does it take and how much product it takes. You guys are going to be the experts. So that's what we're doing, is we're really kind of making sure you guys understand the whole process. Why did I show polished concrete? Because polished concrete will not be in your project work. I showed it to you because in the advanced course, we need to understand more about the types of floors we're dealing with, because it also will help in determining how we maintain those. So that's the reason why we spent so much time on understanding a little bit more about polished concrete. Okay. Okay, any questions as to what we've covered or what we've been covering? Quiet class today. Nothing?
Everything was overwhelmed.
It was. Polished concrete's a lot. So, and I totally get that. And that's why there's also no homework assigned with the polished concrete side. Mark, you did have a question.
Testing. There has been no mention of any kind of testing yet.
Good.
Making me nervous here.
So we just got the testing in. I am spending my time over the next few days getting things prepared for you guys to start testing. Next week, we will do that. Remember I told you hard floor care is the one that takes the longest time. I'm going to be making sure I'm going over the test myself because it's been a while since I actually tested. and I didn't have a hard copy. I had to wait for them to get it to us. So we now have a copy of it. I will be going over that to make sure that we covered all the aspects before you guys test. I don't want to leave you guys out there and go, wow, we didn't cover any of this. So I'll make sure of that, and then that will be something we'll include in on Monday. You guys next week will be able to begin testing on the first part of this on hard floors. Okay. The good news is because we leave a lot more time at the end for stuff, it allows me a lot more time to work with you guys on the testing. So I will be spending a lot of time working with you guys through that next week. I am planning on leaving the last half hour of class every day starting next week to help with testing questions. Because just like you guys have done before, this is open book. It's exactly the same method. It's just more questions for each lesson. I believe it's about 50 questions for each one, for each of the 3 modules. So, and there's only 3 tests on this one. Okay. Same thing, 80% is what we need. And the login will be the same way as we've done before. So it's all still through ClassMarker. So I will have emails out to you guys. I'll make it a point to have that out to you guys by tomorrow, so you have that. You can start looking at your test as soon as tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon. So that'll be available.
For the test.
What's that, Maria?
For the test, are we will have limit time or we will have unlimited time?
You have as much time as you need. You obviously want to finish your testing before we finish the class. That would be the goal. But ISSA gives us... Yes.
When we start testing, we have an hour or we have how much?
As long as you need. You can stop it and resume it later. So it is at your own pace.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of reasons, and there's a value to it. Now, what I'm trying to get accomplished is to, just like we did with the basic, get you guys a written copy so I can post it in the class for a study guide so you can use it, go answer the questions, and then do the online. So they have not, when I said that they just got me this, we got the actual online one last week, but I didn't have the written copy. So without that written copy, I'm not comfortable giving you guys where you're going to start doing something. I don't want anybody, by the way, do not test without doing the practice stuff first. Don't go in and try and wing this. This one, you will not pass. I'm speaking from experience, okay? The third lesson on this, the one that I thought would be the easiest, was the windows and restrooms on above floor. I failed it the first round. So I passed the hard floor pretty easily, the carpet pretty easily, but on that one there's a lot of things about scaffolding and some safety things that I went through, I did it, and I had to do a retake. So yeah, don't try and wing that one. Any other questions? Okay, as I told you guys, this is a lot more detail in this class. You're digging a lot deeper on stuff, on how we go about it. So, all right.
Next, I have a question. Our next hands-on will be the following weekend,
May 15th.
All right.
Okay. I had originally planned for May 8th, but because Therese is not available, we could not do it that weekend. So it will be May the 15th.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that particular one is, as a reminder, it is going to be our carpet one. We will be doing back to back. So May 15th and May 22nd will be our hands-on days. We'll do carpet on the 15th. And then on the 22nd, we will be doing the restrooms and also window cleaning. So on that day, we'll start with the window cleaning in the cooler part of the day. And then we'll come inside and do the restrooms. So we'll spend about an hour or so doing window cleaning. We'll use an extension pole. We'll be using a window washing tool and window washing buckets to do that job. And then on the 20th or on the restroom cleaning, we'll do a detail clean of the restrooms, including you guys getting to use a steam machine to steam vapor clean some areas in the restroom. So we'll do those 2 restrooms there in the hallway. We will divide up in your 2 groups. So one group will do one restroom, the other will do the other. We will get those restrooms thoroughly cleaned top to bottom and make sure that they're detailed. So that's part of this is detail cleaning of areas, including getting the grout clean. So this is, again, much more detail than just doing a daily quick clean, because we could go in and clean those restrooms in about 15-20 minutes easily. But if you were doing it a deep clean, you want to make sure you do it right. And that's basically like project cleaning. Okay. So you guys are learning a lot of the project work. Any other questions? All right. So I will plan on seeing you guys Friday. Just as a reminder, we are starting class promptly at 9 a.m. So from that standpoint, get in here a little earlier. I open the classroom up at 8:30. It's your guys' time. You can visit or whatever, but at 9 a.m. I'm starting. And the reason being is we have a lot of material to cover in these classes, and I want to make sure also you guys have time for discussions where you have questions about stuff. Okay. All right. Thank you guys, and I will see everybody on Friday morning.
You're welcome. Everybody have a nice day. Enjoy the sunlight.
Recording stopped.
David, I have a question.
All right.
After later can you help me?
Yes, do me a favor. Do you have my phone number? Could you text me?
No.
All right. Well, let me get your phone number and I'll.
Okay, can you?
Hang on one second. I'll write it down. Okay, what is your phone number?
916 616 3282.
Let me say that back to you. 916 616 3282. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Give me about 15 minutes and I'll call you back.
Okay.
All right.
Mark, can you call me too? Or can I call you? Mark?
Mark, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, I tried to send you and Ahmad an email, and I must have wrote it down wrong because it didn't go through to both of you guys. So, Dave, when you contact Maria, can you send my email to Dave, to Ahmad and Maria?
Yes, I can do
that. Way they can reply to my email, and I'll have the correct one.
You got it.
Appreciate it.
Dave, as well, I would like to get my my group emailed as well too, the other participants in my group, so we can kind of share information.
Okay.
Since we weren't able to do breakout, we need to figure out what areas we're doing so we can get the project started.
Well, and remember, on Friday we're going to have a lot of breakout time.
Okay.
So you guys will have a lot of time in your breakout room to start on the project. That is a big
Okay.
part of our Friday lesson, is taking this stuff, getting into your breakout room and starting to figure it out. And then I'll be working with both of your breakout rooms to help you through that process.
Okay.
Yep. But yes, I'm more than happy to get an email out to everybody, sharing the email address, getting yours out to everybody.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Steve, do you have a question or?
No, I just waving goodbye.
All right. All right, guys. I'll see
Have a good
everybody
day.
on Friday.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye. So I'll wait for you, okay, David?
Will do. Thanks, Maria.
You're welcome.